Hello, and welcome to Inventors Helping Inventors. I'm your host, Alan Beckley, inventor of the Wonder Wallet. If you're an inventor searching for proven ways to make money with your invention, if you dream to see your product selling in stores everywhere, you've come to the right place. There's no better place to get help than from experts, inventors who've already achieved success. Every week, I interview successful inventors, asking them the questions you want to know. Tune in to learn from the experts so you can get your invention out of the tank and into the bank.
I never had the same experience with iced coffee. It was never something special to me. It was okay. It was just like fuel. And I was working on this project for another company. It had to do with all these innovative thermal techniques and patents. And it just dawned on me as I was drinking a bad iced coffee. I have to brew it hot. I have to brew it fresh. And I have to just change the temperature.
Welcome to episode number 596. Today is a rebroadcast of one of our classic favorites, episode number 300, way back to May 8th of 2023 with successful inventor Dave Dussault. He invented Snapchill, an improved process to Snapchill hot coffee to create a full-flavored cold coffee. I think you're going to enjoy this episode as much as I did. Dave Dussault is an inventor, founder, and entrepreneur who has developed numerous inventions, including the revolutionary Snapchiller machine. He attended college for mechanical engineering and graduated from MIT, where he learned the science of heat transfer. While growing up in the Boston area, he worked at his father's air conditioning business during his summers off from school. His preference for iced coffee impacted his career path, as he was always unhappy with how insipid the flavor of iced coffee becomes as the ice starts to melt, and disappointed in the poor flavor of cold brews. One day, after purchasing a bad iced coffee on a hot summer day, he said to himself, "There has got to be a better way." He set out to solve the problem of fresh iced coffee. After thinking through the fundamentals, including what he learned from his father and from school, he invented the Snapchill process. Launching in 2020, Snapchill has a patented heat exchange process that chills hot brewed coffee to cold in a snap, from 204 degrees to 36 degrees in less than a minute. The process maintains bean integrity and captures the intense flavors of hot coffee, creating an improved, full-flavored cold coffee that is disrupting the cold brew market. Dave, with his co-founder, Michael Corrado, have amassed many devotees with more than 200 craft roasters who've joined the Snapchill movement by developing ready-to-drink canned Snapchill coffee from their beans. The fast-growing company is now highly sought after by some of the biggest national roasters, retailers, and beverage brands to join the booming RTD cold coffee market. You'll want to listen to this entire interview, where Dave shares how snap-chilling hot brewed coffee, then replacing the oxygen with nitrogen, produced a superior cold coffee experience that customers love. Also, the twofold challenge he faced of developing a practical snap chilling process, then finding a business partner to get behind a new, untested product and process. And finally, how the snap chill process can be applied to many different beverages besides coffee, including teas and even cocktails. Now, let's get right to our interview with Dave Dussault. Dave Dussault, it's a pleasure to have you on the podcast with us today.
Thank you very much for having me.
Well, Dave, I'd like to start out by asking you, can you share a bit of your background with our listeners? Where did you grow up and go to school? And what did you do before you became an inventor? Can you share that with our listeners?
So I grew up in a city called Medford, right outside of Boston. And growing up, I was really into sports. And during the summers, I was a helper My father, he had a small HVAC business, kind of a family business. Me and my brother were his helpers. And then went to engineering school, mechanical engineering. And then jumping to the end, I made this custom chilling machine that kind of combined the science of what I learned in school with the practice of working with my dad.
Well, that's fantastic. And in fact, we're going to be learning a bit more about that whole process here in just a few minutes. Thanks for sharing that growing up story in the Boston area, then helping your dad with his HVAC business. And I suspect you got some good skill sets from that. Would that be true?
Yes, I learned how to wake up early, listen to the boss and carry things and attention to detail and being respectful.
All good skills. Some people haven't learned those even in their 50s. So there you go. Dave, you found that cold brew coffee lacked the full flavor of hot coffee. And furthermore, hot brewed iced coffee quickly lost flavor as the ice melted. Can you share with our listeners that aha moment that caused you to invent the Snapchill cold coffee process?
Sure. At the time when I came up with the first idea, it was really simple. A cliche that necessity is the mother of invention. And I guess it's not necessary to have fresh iced coffee, but I'm the kind of person that likes fresh coffee. I like fresh tea. I appreciate fresh food like like a tomato off the vine or freshly baked bread. So things like that. There's kind of a special moment to that, and brewing coffee is one of them. People will walk in, oh, you're brewing coffee, and they smell the grinds. And so I appreciate a fresh cup of hot coffee. And then over the years, drinking iced coffee around Boston, a lot of people drink iced coffee year round. And I think that's a growing trend. I never had the same experience with iced coffee. It was never something special to me. It was okay. It was just like fuel. And I was working on this project for another company. It had to do with all these innovative thermal techniques and patents. And it just dawned on me as I was drinking a bad iced coffee. I have to brew it hot. I have to brew it fresh. And I have to just change the temperature. And I approached it as an outsider in the coffee world. I approached it as a thermal engineer. That first thought of dawning on me, it was just so simple. Why isn't anyone doing this? And then as I went into it, of course, it became a bit more difficult, but the first thought was very simple.
Well, that makes so much sense. And it's quite a good story. I just want to highlight a couple key points that you mentioned to us. And that growing up in the Boston area, you particularly had an enjoyment, obviously, for fresh coffee, but more in your case, iced coffee and fresh tea, fresh fruit, everything. And fresh flavor is meaningful to you. And I suspect that you found that hot coffee had the full flavor, but when you drank iced coffee, there was just something missing there. It seems like it should have been perhaps more full flavored. And then as your work in innovative thermal engineering, I think your aha one day was there ought to be a way to make hot coffee and then lock in that flavor into an iced coffee format. Is that an accurate way to describe it?
It is, but you just took it one step beyond what I think I said, which was the next phase of it. You said lock in. I didn't know right away that we could lock the flavor in. That was, I don't know, a bet I made along the way later. I was thinking originally about drinking the iced coffee fresh after you make it. But then I said to myself that the problem is it oxidizes so fast. Then I was thinking of wine. If a cup of coffee, hot coffee, say, dies or isn't good in about a half hour, maybe wine takes it and it's oxidized or whatever exactly that process is. But wine is preserved for years. So I think that if we chilled this coffee down right away and evacuated all the oxygen and light and all of the factors, just like wine does, then it should be able to preserve. And that took a while to prove that out because we need the proper equipment. But like you said, yeah, it does lock in the flavor.
Well, thanks for explaining that. And one question, just to give clarification for our listeners, not all of whom perhaps are engineers or technical people, but when you talked about both coffee and wine oxidizing too fast, so that sort of oxygen interaction with it, what effect does that have to the flavor, would you say?
Makes it bitter. There's volatile gases that leave. I would say this it's like having a white looking tomato from the grocery store that is just it's old. It's like it's been aged for with a number of processes. Oxidation, I guess I would say that one in particular that's sensitive. A part of it is a bitter taste, definitely. But the other part is it's almost hard to say the words, and I'm struggling for them a little bit. It's almost partially instinctual that it doesn't have the magic moment that I was describing originally.
So clearly, it feels like it's missing something that when it's hot and fresh or just brewed in the case of coffee, then it's got that just right, full flavor feeling. But after some time passes and oxidation hits it, it becomes more dull and sometimes bitter. So it does change that initial flavor that is what people are striving for.
Yeah,
So one thing I wanted to actually ask you just for further clarification within your process, as you mentioned, you call it snap chill. So generally speaking, I'm just going to extend this question, but on your website, it mentions your coffee is canned. How does the process work where it's brewed hot, it's canned, all the flavors there, and then it's canned, but you remove the oxidation, and then how does it stay cold that way? Or must buyers refrigerate the product to get it cold? Can you describe that next phase once you go through the snap chill process?
sure. So the canning machine we have, this was one of the reasons it took some time to prove this out that you can lock in the flavor. The canning machine we have was made for the craft beer industry. It's a real professional canner and it cans the coffee in basically an oxygen free environment. First, we brew it into containers and purge out the air, the oxygen with nitrogen. And then when the coffee goes into the cans, it's exposed to the air, but the canning machine flushes out the space above the liquid with nitrogen through the whole process. So there's no oxygen that's allowed to touch the liquid coffee. And then the lid is put on the can, and then the cans are stored cold. And then we either keep the cans cold or we pasteurize them with a tunnel pasteurizing machine. They're then heated up through a very controlled time and temperature recipe, briefly, but long enough to kill any bacterial action. So then the cans are shelf stable.
Okay, so again, just to clarify a couple of points as I was listening, as you're describing the removing of the oxygen, it sounds like, in effect, you're replacing oxygen with nitrogen. Is
Yeah.
that an accurate statement?
Yes.
So then it automatically has another benefit in that it becomes like a nitro brewed coffee, which is something a lot of people like as well. Is that accurate?
Yeah. Yeah. So that's for a beer person, that's like a Guinness. The So all of our cans first are flush with gas nitrogen, but then they are actually dosed with liquid nitrogen, just as part of the canning process for canning coffee. And if you shake the can, the liquid nitrogen gets infused and mixed in with the liquid. So then when you crack open a can, if you pour it in a glass, there will be a nitro effect. There'll be a layer of a head like a Guinness.
And as I'm thinking through the differences here again, I suspect the key point here is that unlike the oxidation process where the flavor can become dull or bitter, nitrogen does not have that impact on the coffee.
Yep. Totally inert.
So cool. One question I would ask, and this is so true for almost every inventor, it's not always unicorns and rainbows for us as we go through the process. And we almost always run into headwinds and challenges and things that set us back. Could you describe for us for a couple moments what was one of your biggest challenges as you were going through and developing this new process? And what did you do to overcome it?
Yeah, it's a great question. So for me, there was, there's two general levels, I would say. The first is when I came up with first, just the approach of chilling it rapidly. It sounds very simple and, and in concept it is, but then to get a practical machine that does it, that is buildable, doesn't break, and as a real bonus is patentable, which it is, getting that machine to work, once I worked that out, that was probably the first biggest hurdle because I went down in my mind probably 10 paths. And I learned over the years how to make math models of all the performance related factors of the machine. So I'd simulated all the machines I thought up on paper of varying levels of detail. And then I thought about the risk and the costs. And that whole mulling that over, I was alone in that. I don't mean in a bad way. It's just the nature of it for really months. But then when it dawned on me and I exhausted all the pros and cons, the way that was left was so obvious to me. Like I couldn't believe I didn't think of it originally. It was just so obvious. It was like playing Scrabble, and all of a sudden you have a 7-letter word that just jumps right out at you. Why didn't I see that? But to other people, it was nothing. It was equations. It was a sketch of a weird machine that they've never seen before. So the first biggest hurdle was convincing a founding partner with financing that my idea is going to work. And that was that finding that right partner who's willing to jump in and believe in me more than I didn't have a working prototype originally. That was the first big hurdle. Because then there was a commitment together of it's going to cost some money to make a working prototype. And proving that my idea worked with and formulating and strengthening my partnership with my original partner, that was like the foundational biggest hurdle. And then I was just so convinced as an inventor founder that I just see the vision as clear as day, that along the way we bring other people to the team. And then I realized that they're not going to see it as clear as me, and I have to prove it. And I recognize I could be wrong too, but I don't believe that at all. And then are people willing to buy it? Are they willing to spend money on it? And then you and your partner, then you have to prove it a little bit to the outside world and the increasing group of people. In those phases, it was just a number of, we got to try it. Just drink it. Do the Pepsi challenge. And look, the machine, here it is. It works. And a number of people, said, oh, that's amazing. But to get traction with the team, to grow the company, just sticking at it and sticking through it, and then finding the right partners to grow the company. Those are the biggest challenges.
Thank you so much for sharing that with us. And as I was listening, there's a lot of valuable information that I want to just highlight for our listeners here. And as I'm looking at your biggest challenge, I'm thinking of it as you described as going through 3 different steps. The first one I'd call the process. The second I'd call the partner. And the third was the customer, whether the customer was going to like it in the end. And with regards to the process, as you looked at chilling rapidly, the concept sounded easy enough, but it needed to be patentable. And you found multiple paths, multiple different ways that it could be accomplished, but you really needed to optimize it, right? In other words, you needed to find that the most logical or best way that would optimize the end result, which over time you did. And if so many things where it's like an aha moment, where Well, gee, that seems so obvious now, but in the beginning, it certainly didn't seem obvious.
I was say is it was a complete blank piece of paper. I could have went 100 different directions. In retrospect, it's obvious only.
Yeah. And then the next phase was the business phase, and that it was convincing a partner, first of all, that it would work, and then to be able to trust in you and come on board and share the vision. And that's not a small one either that so many people in business go through in one form or another. And then the final one, honestly, is once you're on board and saying, okay, we've got this process, it works, it produces something of value, we like the flavor and the end result. At the end of the day, is the customer going to see the value and the taste and flavor and be willing to buy it? So to me, as you were describing your biggest challenge, I see it as three pieces: the process, the partner, and then the customer.
Definitely. Yeah, nicely summarized.
What is next for Snapchill? Do you have any product extensions you're considering? And do you think you might consider licensing at some point? Or what does the future look like for you?
So the future for us is probably 3 months from now. We're in this startup and it's going so fast. It's this way, that way. It's such an adventure that the grand vision is always out there of this is maybe I just speak about the grand vision, then I'll say a few different options and paths we're going down. It's a little bit more than iced coffee. It's a cooling mechanism. So this is an electrical machine that you hit a button and it changes the temperature of the liquid to the degree you select. And this was part of the early days of scoping down exactly what we're going to do. I made it originally for coffee, but my partner, I brought the prototype to his house and he made a martini, you know? So it's great for cocktails. It's great for tea, especially anything you brew. And we have working prototypes of different scales and different coffee machines that integrate this chilling with brewing. One of the visions of this technology, we generalize it and simplify it and call it the cold button. For instance, I use an analogy of air conditioning in a car. It used to get a car and it used to be a big deal if you had air conditioning. And that was a cool option. And then it became standard. You buy a car now, you say you don't want air conditioning, they say don't turn it on. Similarly, maybe the coffee machines in the future will have a cold button that's powered by Snapchill. And if you don't want iced coffee, you don't hit the cold button, hit the hot button. It can be universally used to chill beverages and integrated in a number of applications.
That's fascinating. One thing that I take out of that is this process could be applied to a variety of different circumstances where there's a brewing process involved and where it might be desirable to have a chilled end result from what initially is a brewing process.
That is what we are completely focusing on right now. But like I said, when I brought the first prototype to my partner, Michael's house, he made a martini. We have the control to set the temperature to whatever we want. He set it to 10 degrees. We're not into cocktails, but that could be around the corner. Tea certainly is around the corner. We do a little tea, some clients, but we're really focused on scaling and growing the coffee business. And we could go any number of directions, next year. It's so hard to say in a startup. And that's part of the fun. It's an adventure.
That's fantastic, Dave. And as we roll to a close, final question or questions for you, twofold. One of them, where can our listeners go to get themselves some of your Snapchill beverages? And then the second one is, how can our listeners reach you if they have other questions?
There's a couple answers. Snapchill.com. We offer about a dozen coffees of our clients. We have about 200 wholesale clients. In Massachusetts, you can also find Snapchill cans in Whole Foods. The brand is an S in a circle. It says Snapchill like a rainbow above it. But we have over 200 accounts across the country. And look up your local small roaster, I would say. And odds are they'll have Snapchill or be getting it. And to contact me directly, dave@snapchill.com. Just email me directly. I'd love to talk to anybody about this stuff.
Well, that's fantastic. I really appreciate that. Again, dave@snapchill.com. And that you
Yes.
said if you're in Massachusetts, you can get them in Whole Foods
Yes.
and also on the website, snapchill.com. And there's dozens of coffees. And as you mentioned, there's small roasters, about 200 accounts that also can provide a Snapchill as part of their repertoire.
Yes.
So I just want to thank you for being on the podcast with us today and sharing your journey and your product and this process that you developed. And I would like to reserve the option to maybe 6 months or a year to touch bases with you once again and see what you've got going on at that time with Snapchill.
Absolutely. That would be great.
Okay, thank you so much for being on today.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks so much for tuning in to Inventors Helping Inventors. If you like the show, please tell your friends about it. Make sure to subscribe in iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts so you won't miss a single episode. Talk to you soon.